Welcome to Impact. I'm Nick Barber, your host. This week we are spotlighting Opera Saratoga's director, Curtis Tucker. Then we take a flight with an interview from Richmore Aviation CFO, James Valakovic, on an important aviation petition issue. And in our Science and Education segment, we soar to a different level with bird watching and how you can become a budding scientist by learning how to be a bird watcher. And finally, since this is the beginning of summer here in the Capital Region, our entertainment segment host, Sabine, keeps her interview with filmmaker Justin Halstead in Nature. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. First up is Philip Morris, our host for the art segment. Philip will be interviewing Curtis Tucker. He is the general director of Opera Saratoga. They'll be spotlighting Curtis's role as a singer, a businessman, and the director of Saratoga Opera. Let's watch.
Welcome to Impact. I'm Philip Morris, the interviewer for the art segment. Our guest today is Kurt Tucker, General Director of the Opera Saratoga, which once was the Glens Falls Opera, in case anybody forgets, right?
It was once in Glens Falls. It was at Lake George Opera.
Lake George Opera
right.
in Glens Falls. Thank
Right.
you for fixing my confusion.
It's a little confusing over 51 years how we've evolved.
It's kind of incredible, 51 years.
Right.
And where did Lake George Opera even start? How did
Lake
it get
George
there?
Opera began, that's actually fascinating. You know, there are a lot of opera companies that start because somebody likes opera, wants to put it on, it sort of grows around a kitchen table, they bring a couple of local friends in and whatever, then maybe it grows into something bigger. Lake George Opera actually began because a gentleman named Fred Patrick went to Lake George, found some folks there interested in opera, and Fred Patrick's wife, Jeanette Scavotti, was a soprano at the Metropolitan Opera. So from the very beginning, Lake George Opera brought artists from the Metropolitan Opera, best singers in the world, up to, you know, what was perhaps sleepy, or maybe it was thriving, I don't know, but this idyllic village in at Diamond Point in Lake George, and began a season up there and started to do a summer opera festival, and it slowly grew. Unfortunately, Fred Patrick died young. He had cancer and died in his early 40s, I think. And but a young tenor that he had brought in, one of those, I think the second season, was a tenor named David Lloyd. And David was singing internationally, and he was teaching at the University of Illinois at some point after there. And he sort of took it over, and David Lloyd is really the person that built Lake George Opera. He was there over 20 years, left, later came back again at some point when the company sort of needed his help again, and he really built the company into what it has evolved into.
And then it moved to
It moved,
Glens Falls?
so it was in Diamond Point, Lake George, I think 3 seasons, in, you know, great, fantastic artistic talent in a very makeshift kind of theater space. There's great stories about, you know, when it rained, the metal roof, you know, you'd hear the rain on the metal roof, and when the electricity went out, people would point their cars, so their headlights, towards the stage, and I mean all of those rustic things. And so it moved about 3 years later to the high school auditorium in Queensbury. And so the company had established an office in Glens Falls, used the theater at Queensbury High School for about 35 years. So for a long time, we were there, and there are still people around the country who, when they hear Lake George Opera, or now Opera Saratoga, they think of that high school auditorium.
And then it migrated south again.
And then it migrated south again. We did a season or two at Adirondack Community College, still up there, because, as you know, theaters occasionally need work done to them. And so as that high school auditorium needed work done, and we couldn't do a festival there, we would look for other places. And eventually where we looked to was Saratoga Springs. And the Spa Little Theater, intimate little Theater in Saratoga. We moved there, and Saratoga, by this point, New York City Opera was no longer touring to SPAC. So there was a bit of an opera void in Saratoga, and Saratoga being in the sort of northern part of the region here, a center of a lot of arts activities, that seemed like a great place to be. My predecessors thought, and I would agree with them. It is a great place to be, and we've been in Saratoga Springs now. This is our 16th summer season there, and it was just about a year and a half that we finally decided, we're really in Saratoga. We perform in Saratoga. Our office is in Saratoga. We're based there. There's still confusion about the name because a lot of people think that we must be based in Lake George and we just come down and perform in Saratoga. And so it took us a while to get there, but we finally did. We call ourselves Opera Saratoga now, and that's really clarified a lot of that.
Now
confusion.
You come from being the maestro, right? You're the conductor.
That's my background. That's part of my background in training. Yes, I'm a conductor by training. I was really a singer. Deep down, I'm a singer. But very early on, I realized that I didn't have a great operatic voice, a great singing voice, and I shifted my focus to conducting while I was in school and studying, and then it was really pursuing that and a little side trip through law school that sort of led me into arts administration. I know it's kind of an unusual path, but somehow in hindsight it all makes a lot of sense because as the general director I oversee the administration, and the law school training perhaps has helped that in some respect, and I oversee the artistic side, and I certainly think that my musical background and training has helped.
Do you sing at all still?
I don't sing much anymore. I do. We'll do an event every once in a while. If it's a casual event where we're not looking for really great singing, I might sing a little bit. We do a Pasta and Puccini event, and I lead some sing-alongs. Occasionally, I'll do things like I am the very model of a modern major general. I'll toss that off at a
information, vegetable, animal, and mineral.
Right, the whole thing.
Are you baritone?
No, I'm a tenor.
You're a tenor.
Tenor. That one's a little lower, but I was I was a mediocre tenor, I guess I would say.
So what? How did this all happen to you? The music thing. Where did it come from?
Pretty naturally, actually. My father was a music teacher, so I grew up in a musical family.
High school, college?
My father was a high school band director. He also was a jazz musician. He toured for a short while with Stan Kenton when he was right out of school. And so big band jazz was really his passion. And but then he sort of settled down, raised a family, that sort of thing. And I have one brother. My brother and I are both musicians. He's a trombonist. And I was also a mediocre brass player, but then I started singing, and voice became, so the vocal side became my interest and my passion, and really very early on from, singing in a children's choir in church, but I started taking voice lessons in high school, and it evolved from there.
So what's your sense about arts education? Kids, arts, music, but you're afraid of it? Do you think it's doing well, doing badly? What can we do about it?
Boy, that turned into a big question with no easy answer.
With an arts family, it's there, and then thousands of kids don't have that.
Yeah, no, certainly a lot of them don't, and I've always been struck, working in this field, by the fact that my own personal experience makes me different than most people. I grew up in a musical family. There was music around me all the time. I came to love opera very early on, even though when you go to opera performances in most places, including in Saratoga, it tends to be an older audience. I still spend most of my time around people older than me. I guess I'm catching up, but it's felt that way. And so I've always been struck by how I don't represent my own personal experience doesn't necessarily represent. So I have to look to other people and get a lot of other opinions. We do a program. Opera Saratoga does a program that goes out into schools. It's been a very successful program. It's been a very popular program. And the one thing that I can say is that when we take a children's opera, simple stage setting, costumes, short little children's opera on a familiar story that they know, Little Red Riding Hood, Jack and the Beanstalk, those sorts of things, the kids' response to those is really fantastic. I mean, they are engaged by it. We do questions, answers afterwards. They ask sometimes very thoughtful questions, sometimes not, but many times they do, but they are absolutely engaged by it, often more so than the teachers and the other adults in the room, which is interesting to see. But, hopefully our program tours into a school maybe once a year, and they see us perform, and an hour later we're gone. So that's hardly providing arts education to children. But I hope that we're at least providing some opportunity and some exposure that maybe they'll be able to grow from.
Well, opera scares people. I mean, the word scares people. And it's goofy. I'm in the business. I love to go to the opera. So how does the industry counteract that sort of, oh my God, it's opera?
Well, I think different people and different companies do it in different ways. And here again, I'll go back to my earlier comment. I sometimes have a hard time. I have to remind myself that for a lot of people, even the word of opera conjures up very peculiar things and impressions and perceptions that I don't even think about anymore, because to me, opera is as natural as watching a movie or watching television or doing a crossword puzzle or whatever. It's just part of life. And of course, that's not the case for everyone. But communication, of course, is central to anything. There are a lot of perceptions about opera. Still a lot of people that think that opera is about fat women in horns, screaming in foreign languages that nobody knows what they're talking about. And the experience at an opera, almost anywhere anymore, is really not that. Even when that particular opera or those particular operas are done, that's the perception and the reality. There's a real disconnect there, and I think that's true. That's always been true of opera, and opera companies try and overcome that in a lot of different ways. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not.
Do you still have a connection with the Met?
We have a connection with it, not through the original connection that I mentioned. Really, about the only connection we have through the Met is, the Met does these HD broadcasts now, and we're a local partner in one of the theaters in the area with that. But it's not a real direct part. And I know some of the staff there, and we certainly have people. They just did a La Traviata production that 3 of their cast members formerly sang with us at Lake George Opera in Queensbury or Saratoga, and the field is small enough that there's always some interconnectivity, but it's not a real direct one now.
Yeah, and I look at what has happened with City Opera, and it's pretty sad, because my experience is with City Opera, not the Met, and my best memories of the opera were at City Opera, and here it is, virtually gone.
Right. It's we've come through a tough time to be the second company. Boston had the same thing. Opera Boston, which grew up as there's Boston Lyric Opera, which is the big company, and then there's Opera Boston that grew up and really was growing at a pretty good pace. Maybe an unsustainable one, I don't know, as it turns out. But a smaller company that was doing some really interesting and innovative repertoire that the bigger company wasn't doing. And so they really filled a niche there in Boston, I think. In Boston, we think of as a big city and a big metropolitan area, and there's a lot of education certainly over there and students and everything else. And within the past year, that company has gone away entirely. And so it's been a tough time, certainly. That's just an example of second companies. New York City and Opera Boston kind of at the same time were really struggling, while they're bigger companies in those cities. Not that they weren't struggling, but
we're taking some big leaps though too. They were taking big leaps.
So
what are you most excited about for the summer?
Well, that it's almost the summer. We are a year-round company in some ways. We do certain things year-round, but there's no question that we are primarily a summer festival. Our main program is the summer festival. And when you're somebody that loves the art and is passionate about the art, and it's the reason that I do what I do, it is a really long time from the end of one summer festival to when the next one starts. And we do all the planning, and we do the events, and we do the fundraising, we do everything that's necessary, and it takes a lot of time to do a lot of that. But what's really exciting is when singers start to arrive, and we're less than a month away from that now, and the technicians start to arrive, which is actually, we're 2 weeks away, and we start building sets, and just all of the excitement and the elements come together. And I think a really great season this year. We're a company that used to do 2 productions in the summer for a while. We expanded to 3. The economy got tough. We went back to 2. This is the year we go back to 3. So it's an exciting summer in that respect. And when you program a season of 3 operas, what you can do when you think about doing 3 operas in a festival as opposed to 2 operas in a festival is night and day different. So as the artistic director that sort of leads that programming process, it's really exciting to get back to 3 operas.
Well, go for it. What are the 3 operas?
So the 3 operas, we've got, we cover a lot of bases. We've got our classic Italian operas, Rigoletto, you know, one of the staples of the repertory, Giuseppe Verdi, passionate score, tragedy, all of those kinds of things we think about 19th century European opera. We contrast that on the comic side with a double bill of operettas. We do a Gilbert and Sullivan's Trial by Jury, which is great fun, and we've done a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan. We're pairing that with an opera, a 1-act by Offenbach that probably nobody in the area has seen. It's very rarely done. It's called Les 66, number 66, and it's very much in the style of Offenbach's other operettas, and which is quite similar to Trial by Jury.
And
so
I was a
jurist
in Trial by Jury, you know, so
excellent. And then the third, to contrast both of those, is a piece of Americana. We're doing William Schumann's 1953, I think it was, opera case, The Mighty Casey, based on the baseball poem Casey at the Bat. So it's nostalgic, it's American, it's baseball themed on a very well-known poem, and we think between all 3 of these that we probably say it every year, there's something for everyone. There really seems to be something for everyone in this season. We've, you know, the opera aficionado that love the classics, the people that want to see something they've never seen before, the people that want to go and laugh and have a good time, the people that want to connect to baseball as something kind of fun.
And I just learned that the director for the Casey at the Bat is a local Schenectady native, Helena.
She is Helena Bender. This is her 4th production with us, and you know, for anybody that has seen some of our other productions, she directed our Madame Butterfly 2009, our La Boheme in 2007, and Italian Girl in Algiers in 2005, and all of those are, I'd like to, of course, I think all of our productions are good, I suppose, but those, she's a really great director. She has a really finely tuned eye for detail, and you know, devil's always in the detail, and you get the details right, everything else kind of follows, and I think that's a particular strength of hers.
Well, I'm looking forward to having her on the show too, as she grew up in Schenectady and grew up with many of the people in town, went to Union College, and pretty cool. Yeah. Well, Kurt, thank you very much. Have a spectacular summer season.
Thanks.
This is Philip Morris from Impact with Kurt Tucker from Opera Saratoga. Thank you for joining us. Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.